Hey guys, it's Mrs. Moylan. We are working on some new stuff this week, ordering decimals and ordering fractions and then comparing them. So first we're going to start off with ordering decimals. We talked about this in class, but just as a reminder, step one for ordering decimals, you want to line up the decimal points vertically, meaning up and down. So you're going to line up the decimal points. Step two, you're going to decide whether you are going from least to greatest or greatest to least. And then step three is to start with the largest place value. So if you didn't get those steps, or maybe you forgot your journal at school, go ahead and pause the video and write those steps down. When it comes to ordering fractions, we've got a couple more steps. It's a little bit trickier than ordering the decimals. So the first step is to find a common denominator. Remember, denominators are multiples. So when we spent all that time finding multiples when you multiply, this will come in handy because you're so good at that skill. Step two, make equivalent fractions using the common denominator, okay? So basically you're making a proportion out of each fraction with the new denominator. Step three, decide if you are going to go least to greatest or greatest to least, just like when you're ordering decimals. Step four, compare the numerators, so figure out smallest to biggest or biggest to smallest. And then step five, use the original fractions. This is a really important step because sometimes we forget after we did all the other work to go back and use the original fractions that we started with. If you're ordering fractions and decimals all at the same time, first you want to convert the fractions into decimals because it's easier to sort decimals than it is to sort fractions. So if you have any fractions, you want to convert them into decimals. Step two, you then want to compare the decimals just like you would usually compare decimals. Step three, use the original fractions and decimals. Just another thing that we tend to forget after we do all that work. Make sure you use the originals. So let's practice a few. Here I've got 4 numbers. 3 of them have a decimal, and then you'll see that one of them is a whole number. If there isn't a decimal, there's always an invisible decimal to the right of the ones place. This is the ones place. There's always a decimal next to it. So we line up the decimals vertically, 73 and 2/10, 74 and 5/10, 72 and 3/10, and then 73, and you can always put a 0 here so you're not confused. Then we find the smallest, so we start with the largest place value. Let's say we're going to go from least to greatest on this problem. Start with that place value, and this does not help us out at all because these are all the same. So that means we have to go to the next place value. And then we'll see we've got a 3, a 4, a 2, and a 3. We're going from least to greatest, so we'll pick the smallest one. That's the 2. So 72 and 3/10 is the smallest. And I like to cross mine off so I don't try and use it again. Then we look at the same place value. We see that we've got a 3 here and then another 3 here. So that's when we have to go to the next place value and see which one's smaller. 0 is less than 2, so that's our next number is 73 and 0/10. Then we have 73 and 2/10, and finally we have 74 and 5/10. So that's how you order your decimals. Here's an example where we've got fractions. So we see that the whole number is all the same. So we need to compare the fractional part of these numbers. So we've got 1/5, we've got 1/3, 2/3, and 1/4. So I'm going to list out my fractions: 1/5, 1/3, 2/3, and 1/4. I see that I've got a common denominator. Well, I'm not really sure what it is. So what I can do is I can list out the multiples of these numbers: 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, and I've run out of space. So hopefully I'll find it along here. So now I've got 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. I see that there's a 15 here and a 15 here, so maybe that's going to be it. So I know these thirds are obviously going to be the same, 9, 12, 15, and then I'll check my 4s. Well, I know 4 isn't going to have 15. So 4, 8, 12, there's a 12, there's a 12, there's a 12, but then not on the 5ths. So I keep going with my 4s. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, 36, 40. Okay, let's see. I am not exactly sure. And this is the point in which you might get frustrated, but just keep in mind all of that stuff that you know about numbers. So we've got 44, and I know I'm going to run out of space here, but I know also that 4 is going to go into 60. And so is this one, and so is this one, and then here's my 60 up here. So I know that that's going to be my common denominator. Now I'm making a proportion, right? So I can take my 60 and I can cross multiply and divide with my 1. So 60 times 1 is 60, divided by 5 is going to be 12. And then I can take my 60 over here, 60 times this 1 is 60, divided by 3 is going to be 20. And then again, 60 times 2 is 120, and then 120 divided by 3 is going to be 40. And then I can cross multiply and divide over here. I've got 60 times 1 is 60, divided by 4 is 15. Okay, so those are my new numerators. I've got a 12, I've got a 20, I've got a 40, and I've got a 15. So after all that work, now I can see my numerators and I can compare those. I see that the smallest one, again, let's go from least to greatest. So the smallest one is 12 right here. That went with the original 1/5, so that's my smallest. Then comes 15, that went with 1/4, so then it's going to be 2 and 1/4 comes next. Then I see I've got 20, that goes with 1/3, so that's going to be the third one in a row. And then I've got my 2/3 because 40 is the greatest numerator, so that'll be 4th. So it would go 2 and 1/5. Cross that off just like with the decimals so that you don't forget. 2 and 1/4. Cross that off. Then we had 2 and 1/3. And finally 2 and 2/3. I'll squeeze that in. And that would be my final answer with my original fractions. Last one, I've just got some decimals. So I see that I'm going to line them up by the decimal point. And you'll see these numbers are tricky because they're all the same numbers, just in different place values. So that makes things kind of difficult. You can always go back and fill in the empty spots so that you're not confused. And then I start with the biggest place value. Let's go from greatest to least on this problem. So this is obviously going to be my greatest, is 1. Cross that off. Then I follow to the next place value, and I've got a 1 in that place value. So this one's going to be my next one in order, 0 and 1/10. Going to the next place value, I see I've got another 1 right here. So that's going to be the next one, 0 and 1/100th. And then 0 and 1,000th is my last one. Okay, so hopefully you can get some practice on your homework assignment tonight, and we'll practice some more in class.